Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel and welcome if you're new. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Celine and she is from Ireland. And we're going to be discussing a bit of each of our health journeys with you. And yeah, just a candid conversation, and hopefully we'll help people with their own healing journeys. So it's morning time for me and it's afternoon for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 2:20.
Yeah. Perfect proof that time and space are an illusion, because here we are in this now moment at the same time. And it's a completely different time, completely different place in the world. And yet here we are. It's
Yeah,
amazing, isn't it?
it sure is. It's been an
Yeah.
amazing gift of the last few years, just that finding that connection with people and new communities that I never knew existed. And they're real, they're more real in many ways than a
Mm.
lot of the physical, relationships I have close by. So it's just expanded my world. I don't know
Mine
about you, but
too.
yeah.
Yeah, it's it's so fulfilling and satisfying being connected with other people that are like-minded. And just like you, most of the people I resonate with don't live anywhere near me.
I
I'd really,
know.
I'd really like to start some things in my community and connect more with people in my own community, but so far I just haven't found that little niche yet. And so until then, I have no problem connecting with people around the world. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Really
I think
cool.
aren't we? We're all, everybody I'm meeting online, and I'm meeting more people physically now in Ireland, but we all seem to be dotted around. It's like little lights on the grid, and we're all lighting up and connecting
Mm,
with each other. And it seems that it has to be that way, doesn't it? We have to go through this process, inner process alone first, before we can
mhm.
then start to connect with each other. And that seems to be how it's happening.
Yes, I like to use a little analogy. We're the salt of the earth, and if we were all in a salt shaker together, we'd hardly have any effect, right? We got to be sprinkled all over the
Yeah,
planet.
exactly. But that really is, that's wonderful to find out, because for many years I felt, I'm sure like you and lots of other people I've met, quite lost and maybe not fitting in and
Hmm.
struggling. And it's so wonderful. Like, this is really as challenging as it has been. It's really wonderful to realize you're not alone.
Yes,
We
yeah,
never are, but
no, we never are. Yeah, it's been a challenge having a mindset shift and change, especially with certain beliefs. You know, coming out of religious fundamentalism is not an easy undertaking, and it can be quite lonely. It can be quite lonely. I'm not sure what your religious beliefs are, but I grew up in a Christian home and still very much a
mm,
Jesus follower.
okay.
But as far as religion goes, it has been a lonely and difficult process coming out of a lot of that stuff. But there's a spiritual teacher that I found. He was a pastor's kid, a PK, and his name is Aaron Abke. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Uh,
No, but you mentioned him, and I actually
yes,
just looked. I've just started to look him up. Yeah, I've
yeah,
started to listen to him.
I
Okay.
really his content has helped me so much. Um, I've actually started studying a course in miracles. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever heard that,
Yeah.
and the law of one kind of simultaneously. There's a lot of concepts that are similar in both of those spiritual studies. So it's really expanding my consciousness. And sometimes I'll have these like panic moments where, like, okay, put me back in my box. This is scary. This is scary.
It is scary. It is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that a long journey? Like, did this happen quite recently when you talk about this fundamentalist religious, like,
Yes.
is this, when did you start to sort of break out of that?
My
Oh.
journey began in 2017. So I'll just to give a
Mm-hmm.
little people a little context. I was almost 270 pounds. I was smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, uh, basically just not caring about my body at all. I was stuck in addiction. My husband is an alcoholic. So I kind of like took the lead as far as recovery. I am a huge fan of 12-step recovery programs. Now, I understand that doesn't work for everyone, but I am incredibly fond of 12-step programs. The right ones, you have to do a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of shopping because
Mm-hmm.
not every group has good recovery in it.
Mm-hmm.
But 12-step recovery saved my life. I've lost about 100 pounds and I've kept it off for almost 4 years. So it's
Fantastic.
been miraculous. So it's been since 2017 that all of these changes happened. We moved to this house that we're in right now in 2017. My husband and I got married in 2017. Um, I quit smoking cigarettes. That was the very first step I took toward better health. And I ended up quitting 2 days before my quit date because I ran out of cigarettes in my pack and I just didn't want to buy another pack.
Oh.
And wow, that was tough. I got to remind myself sometimes um, of the things that I've been able to overcome because I'm really hard on myself.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
sometimes, just talking about where I was just 5 years ago. I mean, 5 years is not that long of a
Yeah,
time, you know,
no.
and so I was very much in religion and going to church. Nothing wrong with church, there are some that are still appealing. I don't go anymore, but I've really enjoyed Aaron Abke's stuff because he being in that even more so than I was, he's able to explain things in a way that is just so understandable. And he has this series on his YouTube channel, and his YouTube channel is just his name, Aaron Abke. I'll put a link to it in the description box. Um, it's called Moving Backwards, this series called Moving Backwards, and it's about saving faith from fundamentalism. And when I watched that, it was like all of everything was just going into this neat little box of understanding. And I felt so, I don't know, I guess relieved and that someone else understood not only what I was feeling and thinking, but explained it in such a way that was so easy to understand. So I highly recommend
Mm.
going and checking him out if you are coming out of religion and need a little bit of help. So
Okay.
yeah. So Celine, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? Celine is an author. She has her own YouTube channel. She's had quite an incredible journey recovering from cancer. And I'll put links to her channel and to her website so you can go check out her book if you would like to do that. So why don't you just
Mm.
tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got from there to here and
Ooh, how long have you got?
I got all
I'll,
day, but
yeah, I'll sort of give some sort of a summary, and sure, maybe we can dip in and out of different things. But yes, I'm from the west coast of Ireland, and I suppose cancer was my big wake up call, and it was 2016. So it's interesting when you say, 2017, things started happening for you because I'm meeting an awful lot of people around the world, and it seems to be a lot of our own awakenings or wake up calls or shifts started to happen about 4 or 5 years before. I sort of feel to prepare us. I
Mhm.
feel I was being prepared for this time now. I suppose as a child growing up, I sort of always go back because I'm still on this, even this morning, I had sort of more. I'm doing a 30-day, it's an online raise your vibration boot camp with an amazing woman in Ireland called Abby Wynn. I think I'd sent it to you. She's a healer. So I just felt I very much live intuitively now, and I felt the sort of call to do it. And it really brought up, it's again, we've come through a full moon. I feel a lot of cycles have been sort of completing for me now. They're always completing. But I was a very, I suppose, sensitive child growing up. I'm a child of, there's three of us, and I'm a middle child. And there wasn't a lot of emotion or emotional expression in my family. And my parents were good. I had, looking in on the outside, I seemed, it seemed an okay family, and it was in many ways, and often led me to feel I couldn't. I should be grateful because there were so many people with worse situations. But again, it was my journey, and I learned to suppress my voice, suppress my emotions. I felt very overwhelmed by them. I had a lot of, I could pick up. So I really now can see I was picking up on everything as a child, and I had no boundaries and I had no sense of myself. And I learned that through working with an astrologer recently, because I'm a Piscean, and I never really had that sense of self growing up. But I was led to believe, I was sort of just without boundaries floating around. And that made my life journey, I think, quite challenging, because I've kept being hit with situations which have really tested my boundaries. And now I can see, looking back, that all of that was to help me develop this sense of self.
Mm.
And then, I can sort of be in the flow, and then I can sort of come back into that oneness. So all of my life journey leading up to cancer, I suppose cancer was the big one, where I had pushed myself beyond in terms of giving. So I'd a huge imbalance in terms of giving and receiving in my life. So even as a young adult, I felt quite lonely. I felt, even though on the surface I looked, I worked, I went to college, I did all of that, I worked in marketing. I then got married, and I met someone who I felt a very strong connection with, but it turned out he was gay. That was the first huge trauma in my life. And I realized from that I had been living very much from my masculine. I can see that, my masculine energy, because I was always doing, and this was how I sort of felt I proved myself and I was worthy in the world. And he obviously was living in his feminine. So that really brought me in a downward spiral after that into alcohol abuse, like you mentioned, anxiety, overworking, overspending. I literally just, I ran away to Greece. I lived in Greece for a year. I did a Shirley Valentine, like the movie, and eventually landed back in my hometown in Galway and working in a university. But again, even though I had dealt with a lot of the issues, and I still, I got into sort of, work became a new addiction. So I worked in a university, I worked with teenagers, which I loved. So eventually it was all building and building until I sort of say 2012, work became very toxic. There was a lot of toxic situations. I got into a very toxic relationship with someone who was very narcissistic. So this is really bringing up the whole thing about boundaries and a sense of myself. 2014, I have a car accident. So here's another wake up call. I hit a wall, and I'm off work for a month feeling really unwell, like I have a little bit of a mini breakdown. I can't function, I can't think anything, but I didn't know what to do. So I go back into work. And then a year and a half later, 2016, I get a breast cancer diagnosis on my right side, which is very much the male end, yeah, the masculine. And that is when everything changed for me, really. I Having gone into treatment, which I don't know that I would do again, but it was my journey and what I needed. And I went through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery. The toll that that took on my body and mind really shut everything down. And I
Mm.
realized that was what I needed, because I didn't know how to stop. And I was just in this whir. Um, and in that moment, or that time, living alone, at home during treatment, everything stopped, something broke open in me. And I really feel sometimes that moment had to happen for me, that letting go, that surrendering. I can't control life anymore. Doing is not the answer. It was really bringing me back into a connection with myself. And like you, I had been through a religious upbringing, not maybe as extreme, but Catholicism, Christianity is the religion in Ireland. But that, for many people in Ireland, when I was much younger, there was a lot of things that started to come out about the church. So the opposite happened. Everybody rejected God, spirit, all of that. And I feel that was a very concerted effort. We're now coming back into our true connection. So that has been a quite a nice journey for me. I never felt it wasn't a huge part of my story, that sort of the religious side of it. Because I quite quickly knew I don't need a middleman to get to God. I do this myself. It isn't that's the key to it, really, and that's where we free ourselves. So that's sort of, in a very nutshell, has been the journey, and it's ongoing, and there's still healing going on, and I'm still learning about. I mentioned to you, Emmy, on a message just on Thursday, Friday gone by. I bumped into someone who I had a real issue with boundaries with a number of years ago. So, as people disappear, they sort of disappear when you've sort of, the lesson has been learned and the healing has happened. And I stood up to this person where I had really given a lot of my personal energy away to them without even realizing, sort of a passive aggressive type of a relationship. And I bumped into them in a shop that I never have even seen them in before. And I was coming out the door, and I just this is the beautiful progress that we can make. I mean, there's a lot of work I still have to do, but I looked at her and she looked at me, and I just went, hi, and I smiled at her, and I walked away. And I sat in my car for a few minutes afterwards, and I just sort of felt into it and said, okay, what's going on here? And I genuinely can say I didn't feel any energetic entanglement. I felt it was a completion. Now, there are other relationships I've still to work on, but there was something beautiful in that. It was showing me, okay, I checked in. I felt this soul contract, as I see it, is done with us. So it was a beautiful sense of completion just before the full moon too. There was something really beautiful in that. So yeah, that's a quick summary.
Awesome, awesome.
Getting to here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book and what motivated you to write a book?
Or it was never part. This is the just for everyone to see. It's, if you can't see on the screen, it's gifts from the devastation, what cancer taught me about life. So, like you said, I had never written anything. I After cancer, for anyone maybe who is going through cancer, who might be watching this or has, or any devastation, one of mine happened to be cancer. I knew after treatment, and it was about 2017, I had a lot of fatigue. So for about 2 years, I really wasn't able to do much, which was a saving grace, because I would have gone back on the hamster wheel because I didn't know what else to do. And I didn't know how to extricate myself from the system and the matrix, which I think many of us are in the process of doing. So in that letting go that I talked about, I literally asked God, asked the universe, you've got to show me the way. I cannot go back, but I don't know what to do. And within a very short space of time, someone I hadn't seen in 20 years, I bumped into them in Galway here where I live. And I started telling her, I'm really struggling here. I don't know what to do. I cannot go back to a life and a way of living that practically killed me. I
Mm,
got cancer, but I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And everyone and the people around me, there is an expectation, not, unconsciously, I don't think it was intended, but that I would go back. So I really struggled and felt very alone. And she told me about a woman, a teacher of mine who had retired and was teaching a course called The Artist's Way. It's a book by a lady called Julia Cameron. So I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful book about getting in touch with yourself. It's a spiritual approach to creativity, I suppose. It's connecting So really you're going into who you are, what you're about, understanding your blocks, so really tuning into who you are and bringing that to life. And I knew nothing of this book, but it started a group of women meeting in her house every week, beautiful little house by the sea. And we just started sharing and working through the exercises in that book. And one day, while having coffee with this lady who was facilitating the course on her own, she said to me, Celine, you're always talking about what you're learning from this experience, how it's changed you, and I can see it's changing you. And I can see that you're happier. I can see that you're more fulfilled. You're more you that I remember. She remembered me when I was younger, even though I didn't feel I'd lived very authentically, but there was something she had seen in me or sensed in me. And she said, would you think of writing it down or writing anything about what you're learning? And I said, I can't write. And I just left her house. I drove home. I remember going in automatically almost into my laptop in the afternoon, and I just started typing. And 6 months later, a draft of the book was written. It was like I feel it was very much channeled almost, because yes, it took a lot of editing and a lot of work, but it just came through in chapters. The interesting part of it is that was about 2017. I brought it to a publisher in Galway. I didn't know what to do. I asked people, what do I do? I've written something. I don't even know if it's a book. I don't know. I don't know what it is. So somebody, maybe it's just ramblings or a diary or a journal. And I brought it to this first woman who had set up a publishing company in Galway, and she was mainly working with women. So I left the book with her and the manuscript, and she said, look, I'll come back to you. And she called me in after about a week. And she said, look, you can write, but this was the really curveball that came. She said, would you think of writing fiction? And I was, fiction? I've just written my story. This is really, really strange. But I understand now. So this is how the universe works in very strange ways, but in miraculous ways. So I didn't really understand this up until about a year or two ago. So I left her house and I had nothing else to do. I didn't know what to do. And I said, okay, I'll give it a go. And as I was driving home, all these little voices started coming in my head, little like characters. And I was, okay, maybe. So I started into something else, and it became a book called The Tapestry of Life. So I did publish a first book. I self-published a first book, and it's fictional, and it's about the power of community. It's based in Galway. It's about 3 generations of women and how their lives just come together, synchronistically, and how they change each other. And it was reflecting, I suppose, the women who would come into my life, the feminine came into my life, the divine feminine that really, I get the shivers when I say that, really helped me on my healing path. And I went to a writing course, and that book, I published in 2018. And then 2019, sorry, October 2019. And that I learned a lot about writing. I learned about myself. I really tuned into, the idea of the tapestry of life, that we're all very unique threads that make up the tapestry of life. And we meet each other as we need to, we're guided to the meetings that we need, like us meeting and other beautiful sort of comings together in the last few years. So it was very interesting. I published that in 2019, very shortly after we go into lockdown. And I'm looking at the draft of my first book. And I go, okay, it's obviously time to revisit this. I had a full year. And the interesting thing, this is the magic I learned. So a couple of years had passed, and I looked at the manuscript, and the manuscript was really reflective of what's happening collectively. It's gifts from the devastation, which was my personal story, but it's really become sort of, I suppose, an analogy, or very it's relevant to the collective devastation I believe we're going through. And many of the things I had written about in it are actually about, talking about now, like a new world, a new way of living, a new type of human. So so that then I published that in last year, earlier this year. I'm getting confused with where we are. But isn't it a beautiful, the way that happened, that I was led to publish something. But it was just one thing on that as well. The key that I learned is, we are never shown more than the next step. And I lived, and I think we're conditioned to live in wanting to know, where's my life 5 years down the road if I make this decision? So it was teaching me to be present and to just tune into my heart, follow my guidance. And I was brought on this amazing journey to publish this book at just the right time, you know.
How beautiful.
Yeah, and the process, sorry, just one thing as well, because often if we, I'm sure you know as well, anything we go through, it takes us time to integrate. And if I had published this straight after cancer, it was too soon. I'm
Yeah.
still learning from it. I'm still healing. I'm still growing. I always will be, but a lot had to happen. So I hope in someone they're reading it, they're getting the sense of my life before, what it was like to go through it, and not just cancer, what's it like to go through a devastation, and what did I learn, and what sort of things did I do practically to start getting on that step by step of creating a more authentic life. And I have practical tools in there for people to.
That is awesome. That's so
Yeah, I
awesome.
hope so.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing your story.
Thank you.
What kinds of things did you do in your healing process to help you and support you? Like, was there like a mindset shift or change from what you were doing before and to what you're doing now? Like, how is your life now different from the way that it was then?
Uh,
Night and day.
Nothing's the same. Even physically, I had beautiful blonde curls, almost as lovely as yours. I mean, I was just so different physically. I mean, obviously, it was just a very physical, but I needed that physical shift. Like losing my hair was just the most liberating thing, even though it was the most terrifying thing. It was the most liberating thing. Um, Oh, in every way. I mean, I'd always probably adopted quite a holistic approach to life. I think, like you, I was always dabbling. I started Reiki years ago. I left it. I started craniosacral therapy. I left it. I was sort of afraid and I wasn't ready. I did trained in sound healing. I left it. I started in counseling and psychotherapy, but all of it was preparing me like nothing, because I'm using that now. So even it's a whole other story and it would take too long to go into, but I had worked in 2012 when I really started to, I was going through a lot of difficulty, like I said, at work, and a lot of toxic relationships, a lot of toxic situations, and met a beautiful healer living in Ireland from the Lebanon. And I started going to his meditation classes, and that started a real process of, yeah, really tapping into. I still had a long way to go, but it was starting that healing journey on a very, I suppose, deep level. I'd always felt that connection. So I trained with him as a sound healer. What was really interesting was in 2014, after my car accident, I had suppressed so much. And I'm sure if for anyone who's the same, I literally was up to here with emotion and
Mm.
just, and I went to a healer. I was always being guided. I went to everybody and anything. So it's always been, I think it's always been there in me, that connection to spirit, that mind, body, spirit, but I shut it down at times. But I went to this beautiful healer out in the countryside in Ireland, never did know anything about him. People thought I was crazy. They thought he'd murder me or something. But what do you mean you went to his house? I went, oh, it was fine. I just knew it was fine. And I left his home. And a day later, I was going to a yoga class or something. And I was in the car before the class. And I started this tsunami of emotion started in my feet. I've never in my life experienced anything like it. It just literally came out, and I was howling in my car for about a half an hour. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And I rang him. I said, what is happening? I'm falling apart. I have to function. He said, when you were when you were in this session with me, your higher self, you knew, a higher part of you knew it's time. This has to start leaving you. You have to start clearing the trauma. So that's been a big part and still is. And I would say this to anyone, is your key to empowering yourself is really releasing and feeling and moving this energy through you. I went through a month of every day having to, and I asked him, I said, I cannot function. He said, just ask that it happened when you're on your own. And from that moment on, it only ever happened when I was on my own. And I literally would go to work and I would have a break at lunchtime. And at lunchtime, I'd start to feel nauseous. And I go, okay, here it's coming. Go to my car. I would howl and scream for about a half an hour. And it literally, and then I would just be like a rag doll in the car. And then this beautiful peace, you know, that feeling when you've sort of, you've released something, but it was exhausting. But I did a month of that, and it was like, this is the backlog. I don't know if this was past lives. I don't know what it was. He said, you don't need to know what this is. There's huge grief, there's huge pain. So that started that process. And then cancer as well started to bring me more. I knew even though I went through treatment, I had gone to a healer and he had removed, I knew it, he had taken the energy out of the tumor. And I knew it, but it was still in my lymph nodes and I had sort of forgotten about that. So it was spreading. Oh, he's so cute.
Thank
He's
you.
gorgeous.
Pardon the interruption. Yeah,
No, he's
they
beautiful.
just got back from the woods. We spent the night in the forest last night
Beautiful.
under the full moon. Oh,
Oh my
it
God.
was glorious. Yeah.
Wow. Gorgeous.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I suppose that the journey has been a very holistic. I mean, my pace of everything is different now. I have a strong sense of connection to God, to my source, to spirit. It is just everything. That was the breaking open when I had cancer. And I would say that to anyone listening, you know, we always have a choice. And that's sort of a theme in my book, that life is always happening to help to bring us on that journey of remembering who we really are and why we are here.
Yeah.
And that has been my experience. And I guarantee anyone watching, if you take those steps, doesn't mean it's easy, you know, too. I mean, we all know, don't we? When you go on this path, as someone said to me, you couldn't sell it to anyone because it's a lot of pain, but there's a lot of joy. And you really start to, don't you? You come into the magic of remembering who you really are and these beautiful gifts and abilities that we have. So I live a very holistic life now, very slow, need to be in nature, creativity, very connected to the earth, to myself, huge healing going on with my mother. I live with my mother, I've been back with her. She's elderly, and that's been a hugely healing because I always felt quite separate from her as a child, you know, from birth. And it's like
Mhm.
coming full circle. So it's,
That's
yeah.
beautiful. That's
Mm,
beautiful. Yeah. Like
mm,
you, I kind of always um knew that I had this intuitive connection, but I suppressed it. You know,
mm,
I'm very grateful that I did listen to that with certain things. I remember in my early 20s as a young mom, I was so afraid of screwing up these little people that I read so many books. I read so many books on parenting, and I was introduced to 12-step recovery 22 years ago. And even though I didn't stay in the program back then, I did learn tidbits like all of the slogans, like one day at a time and first things first and easy does it and live and let live. You know, all of those beautiful affirmations, you know, stayed with me. And I always gravitated toward natural and
mm.
instead of man-made. You know, I always felt that God-made things were better than man-made. Like, how do you trump God? Like, you know, it's just,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but even so, I still ended up on the pharmaceutical roller coaster. And when you were talking about this emotional upheaval that you had, I had something similar happen to me when I was coming off of pharmaceuticals. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Um, I believe because they just didn't know what else was wrong with me. I had
Mm,
been to every specialist. I had all kinds of testing done. Everything was normal.
mhm,
Um, So, they labeled me with fibromyalgia and put me on pain meds and antidepressants, and that ended up giving me terribly high blood pressure. It started damaging my kidneys. Um,
Oh my
so,
God.
and in 2017, that same year after I stopped smoking, about 4 or 5 months after I stopped smoking, I decided to come off of the pharmaceuticals. And the one had made new pathways in my brain. Um, and I was basically stuck in a prison of negative emotion. It's almost like the fear, paranoia, guilt, shame, remorse was just completely amplified. And that was just the emotional side effects. The physical side effects I was having coming off this medication were um, terrible, absolutely terrible. I probably should have been in some kind of recovery facility, at least for the first
Mm.
week or two after coming off of it, because I mean, you'd think I was coming off heroin. I
Oh
was
my God.
I was sweating profusely, I was vomiting, I was shaking, my blood pressure was so high, I was passing out. Um, and I ended up with a condition called post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And you don't realize what it does to your brain until you stop taking it, because there really is, you don't really feel an effect while you're
Okay.
taking it, but when you stop taking it, I had these things called brain zaps. I called them brain zaps, and it was like a split second electrical zap that would like shoot from one part of my brain to another. And uh, it was so terrifying. Sometimes I would get them in my spine too. It was in my brain or in my spine. And sometimes when they would happen in my head, I would have split second blindness. I
Oh my
mean, these
gosh.
these medications, these medications
Mm.
are dangerous. They're so
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even depressed. I was not depressed. I had no anxiety. I had horrible debilitating pain in my body, and they put me on an antidepressant for that. And it just ended up causing more issues. So I decided to come off the pharmaceuticals, and I searched and tried many different natural supplements, and I was able to find one that um, helped relieve the pain enough so that I could continue um, coming off these medications. And
Hmm.
so, getting to the emotional upheaval, for 8 months straight, I cried every day for 8 months. But I was determined to heal naturally. Like,
Mm.
you know, so many people who try to come off these pharmaceuticals are met with such misery that they go back to their doctor and get on a different one
Mm.
because they just can't handle. And I completely understand that. I had very, very intrusive suicidal thoughts. I was
Gosh.
I was afraid to drive anywhere alone.
Oh my gosh.
um it was not me. I felt like
Mm.
I was in a prison in my own mind. um Terrifying
Gosh.
experience.
And aren't they designed though to keep you in that? That's the
that's
point, as you
exactly
said.
that's
I've heard
exactly
someone say, "Did we really believe that God got it wrong when He created us? That we need all of this?"
Mhm.
It's really showing that, isn't it? But
Mhm.
if someone said, "Who created it?" There's no such business model. They don't have a business model that wants us to be healthy and well and walk away. So, like you describe, keep you
Well,
dependent on the system.
health and wellness doesn't make any money.
Of
The medical system is a huge cash cow.
course.
And in
Mm.
order to keep us coming into the doors needing their help, they have to keep us sick.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
Mm.
I called the manufacturer. It was Eli Lilly is the manufacturer of
Okay.
this particular
Mm.
drug. Um, they told me that I needed to go back on it. I was calling to make a complaint. I called several times, and I kept telling me that I needed to go back on it, and they wouldn't connect me with. It was a fight. It was a fight to get on the phone with someone who would actually take my complaint. It was terrible. That at that point in time, I pretty much lost all respect for the Western model of
Yeah.
medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that sounds horrendous. I mean, such an experience. I mean, I knew going through, I didn't want, on different levels, when the choice came to go through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, surgery, I delayed that for a long time because I really didn't want to go that path. It sort of went against everything that I believed. And I worked then with a spiritual healer. This is what happened. But I do understand from a higher perspective now why that happened, because now I can relate. Now I've been through that experience. Now I can help others who go through it too. It also gave me a period of time out of my life that I would not have taken otherwise if I had healed quickly. So there's many reasons, but I really struggled with it. I really struggled with it. And I worked with a beautiful woman, a spiritual midwife. That's how she describes herself.
Oh,
She's an Irish
wow.
woman, beautiful woman. Yvonne Murphy, a chiropractor, and oh, I get shivers when I think of her again. She travels between India and Ireland, and someone again, not an accident, said to me, Celine, maybe just have a session with her. She's in England and in India, and at the time it was on Skype back in 2016. And I had to do one session of chemotherapy before I could get a session with her. So, or it was the night before, I can't remember. And we had a session, and she said, look, there's no right or wrong in this. Whatever your path is meant to be, whatever feels right, you go with that, because who's to say what is your path in life and what you will do with the experiences you go through. And that really helped me. I don't think I would do it again. I think it's up to each of us. We have to decide what's right for us. But like what you described, I mean, I was sitting there the very first day of chemotherapy, looking at this bag of a red liquid going into my body, going, oh my God. And oh my God, what am I doing? That's going to kill me as well as whatever, and I knew I didn't need, that this is the thing. But, I think that is a deeper part, the higher part of me knew why I was doing it. Maybe physical, Celine, but I did know at the time why I'm doing this. And I was very aware when I spoke to the medical people, I had conversations with the consultant, and he said, look, Celine, it's your decision. To be fair, he was a very good man in the system. He said, look, this is the medicine I practice. It's your decision, and I'm not pushing this on you. And that was, there were people who did. And then I had my family. So yeah, it was a decision. But like you said, there were days I was lying on my kitchen floor in pain and getting sick and horrendous. And even still to this day, I can get glitches. I think I've been rewired in the process. I think it might have been God's way of rewiring me because everything works differently now. I don't know. Like it was horrendous, but look, we can heal from anything, can't we? Really, when
Yeah.
this was my, I couldn't be who I am without what I went through, and it just really, really reconnected me with God, with Source, with my power. I mean, I fear nothing really. Well, my mother sometimes, but and I know she is old, the old habits die hard, but no, overall, and isn't it like when you describe that, like did you say
8
months?
months.
Oh my gosh. I
Hmm.
mean, where did that take you then afterwards, Emmy? So you said, okay, you rang Eli Lilly and all
Hmm.
of, like, where did that bring you then after?
Well, I threw myself into everything natural. Um, Meditation was
Mm,
cornerstone. Meditation,
mm, mm,
affirmations, visualization, and another cornerstone was forgiveness.
mm,
Forgiveness has given me such freedom. I I just I can't even describe what it has done for me. I really had a distorted view of what forgiveness is. And so I was kind of holding on to that because of those distortions. And but once we can understand that forgiveness um, is about setting yourself free from that poison, and um, we don't have to have relationships with the people who hurt us to forgive them. It doesn't mean that we're accepting whatever they did to us. It doesn't mean that we have to like them or engage with them.
Mhm.
But when you can forgive a person or an event or an institution and let them go, it creates this space in you that really expands your consciousness. And on a level of being we're all one, the forgiveness helps you to see others as completely blameless and innocent.
Mm.
And everything that is not love is not true. It's an illusion. It is a catalyst meant to help us get to the next level of consciousness. And forgiveness is probably the single most important activity that you can do in any kind of healing, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Forgiveness is absolutely cornerstone.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's beautiful. I mean, isn't that what they say about forgiveness? If you don't, it's like taking poison and hoping they
the
will
other
die.
person dies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
remember hearing that said, I said, oh my God, nothing describes it better because I lived in that with many situations in my life. And, even the person I described that I met just a few days ago, I didn't feel anything but love, not in a personal sense. I really didn't. I can say that genuinely. I didn't feel that way a few months ago, but that was forgiveness. And I think as part of that, when you said as well, the sort of knowing that everything else is an illusion, what's really helped me, and it obviously has been releasing a lot of this emotional pain, because as long as this is here, to avoid it, I would have gone out and said, oh, it's their fault. They did this, they did that, because I was avoiding facing what was inside. And
Yeah.
once I started to clear this, then I began to see from a higher perspective, I created all of this, like source, whatever. We've created all of this to remember who we are. So
Mhm.
just giving the example of me coming into a life where I had no sense of boundaries, I wasn't really allowed them in the family setup that I was in. Every difficult, challenging situation in my life has been about me finding a sense of myself and being able to say no. Now, it's been so, so, so hard, isn't it, at times? But
Yeah.
now that I can look at it, I've no ill will against my ex-husband. I know exactly there was a soul contract there. I feel with that girl I met the other day, I don't either, because I had to say no. And I can remember the day I said no to something. And I stood in the street and I was shaking, shaking. And I bumped into her on the street, and it was over something silly to someone else. But to me, it was huge because I'd no sense of myself at all. And giving away my personal energy and what was, having a separate energy field, and it was okay to say no. And I said no, and I remember going around the corner and I literally cried and I shook. But that was the start in that relationship. So, and I still have a few, I don't know, but I still have some, areas, and they'll always keep coming up. But that's beautiful, as you said. Once you start to see that, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
the rest is just an illusion. It's all just set up for, we
Yeah.
set up the characters, didn't we? We set up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Crazy, crazy people that we are, or crazy.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what I did in a past life that I chose.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I don't know about for you,
yeah.
but for me, it's been so empowering, um, coming to the understanding that I chose this.
Mm,
I
mm,
handpicked everything
yeah,
in my life, every person, every
yeah,
event. I picked this. So it's like instead
mm,
of being a victim of life,
exactly,
I am now a creator of life. And
exactly,
I
yeah.
can take every situation, every person, and if something is difficult, I can ask myself, okay, what is it that I wanted to learn from
Mm,
this?
mm,
And it just completely changes your perspective.
yeah.
It makes, you know, things are still difficult, but it's nowhere
Mm,
near as difficult as it was when I believed that I was just a victim of life
yeah,
and everything was
oh,
happening to me, you know?
exactly. And
Mhm.
that's a key message in my book, is that, life is not happening to me. This is my learn. Yeah, the same. It's happening for me. And when
Mhm.
we shift, when that happens, and I mean, I believe there's sort of a divine timing for everyone, when this happens, and maybe when we decided, what's going to trigger it to happen. For
Mm.
you, it was something different. For me, it was cancer, but it was all, and then it shifts it's so empowering. Like you said, you're a creator of your life. I really feel that now. So if I feel my thoughts going off in a certain path, or I'm not facing my own emotional, what's this bringing up for me? You have something here to process. So, what sort of boundaries, where are you giving yourself away? We have it totally changes, doesn't it? As you said, you still have difficult times. I've had some. Last week, I had one of the most painful day or two, that I think I can nearly ever recall
Yeah.
recall having. So it doesn't mean you don't have this, but it means but you still know how to navigate it. And I think I move through it quicker than I used to. And
Mhm.
I can sort of distance, I can observe. Most of the time I can come into observer and go watch what's happening. But yeah, it's beautiful. But this is life. I heard a beautiful lady I follow among many people, Laurie Ladd, and she talked about devouring life. And I love that,
Mm.
because it is, isn't it? It's everything. This is the experience of being alive. It's
Yes.
devouring
Yeah.
it all.
I enjoy Lori Ladd too.
Mm,
She was one of the first spiritual
here.
teachers I came across in 2020 when all this
Me
stuff
too.
was going on. And
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoy her stuff.
Yeah, and then we move around. A big thing for me, and I think we're all learning in this, is, really coming into our own sense of personal power or sovereignty, and for where we are at in our journey, what resonates, what doesn't, and it doesn't matter, about anything else. It's not about judgment or who or what anyone. Like, I still can say I was in that sort of separation for the first part of maybe 2020, and
Yeah.
right and wrong and this. And then I realized, whoa, you're going in another layer now, Celine. You're seeing that this is not about right or wrong or who made certain choices. It's coming back into love, because, oh, he wants to go out. Yes. Mm, yeah, but that isn't it? Every time you think, well, I find every time I think, oh, I've learned what's going on, you go, no, I know nothing. I'm
Yeah.
going in. I think that's the key, to know I know nothing. No, I know nothing, and then you're okay.
Mhm. Yes.
And
Awesome.
be open to everything.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much, Celine. It was been such a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you,
Um,
Emmy.
yeah, for
Love being
anyone
on your
who,
show.
oh, awesome.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, you're
I had
welcome.
been watching you on your channel, and it's lovely to watch someone and then be on their show and go, wow, this is the magic of the world we live in. You can just
Yes.
connect into your house. I was watching you, and now here I am.
Oh,
So it's
awesome.
beautiful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Blessings, everyone. I'll talk to you next time.
Take care.